Hey guys, Alex Sutherland here, and today I am making a demo video for how to submit really high quality scenarios to the all new GTORangeBuilder Flop Library. We are releasing this today. I'm super excited, and hopefully you guys will think it's pretty cool. So this is the Flop Library, and right now we've got a few hundred scenarios here that you can browse that are models that either I or users just like you guys thought would be interesting to run interesting flop scenarios that examine specific spots and will help you learn to play better in those spots in your games at the tables. And as you can see, this is an example situation here. There's a board. Someone wrote a nice description for it. This is actually a user who saw me run this board in one of my video packs and wanted to make some slight alterations to it. They had some ideas to improve it. So they submitted their own scenario. I ran it through our solver, added it to the library, and now anyone can browse the solution just by clicking the View Solution button and letting the solution load up here. And, this case, the person who made the scenario, they were kind of taking a scenario I had carefully crafted and thought hard about the ranges in the bet tree for, and saying, I'm not sure these ranges are right, or it just might be interesting to tweak them and see what happens. I think we could learn something from that. And so they went ahead and tweaked the big blinds range to add more nut combos, more 9-8 combos, because they were, interested in exploring whether some assumptions I had made about the ranges might, have a big impact on the solution. So that's kind of the simplest way you might want to create your own scenario, is to take an existing one and either edit the ranges or edit the board texture. And we built in a really simple way for you guys to do that if you're curious. Whenever you're in a solution, you can click this little edit button, and it'll bring you here to these solution details, and you can start working on this solution from the exact point that the person who originally built it left it at. So I can go in here, I can tweak a range, add queen 7 for some reason. I can alter the board, ace, clubs, jack, d, 7 hearts. Anything where I'm just editing the ranges or the board is basically no work. Everything's just going to work. I can click submit, and it'll ask to tell us a little bit about the scenario. So this would be a 6 max cash scenario. It's going to be big blind versus cutoff. Sorry. So the hero's roll here is the big blind. The villain's roll here is the cutoff. And I'd say, I added queen 7 to this single raised pot scenario to see if it mattered and change the board. Writing a better description would be better, but I have no real reason to run this, so I'm just doing it quickly to give you guys a demo. And you hit submit. It'll tell you that if your scenario is accepted, it will be added to the library within 48 hours. I'm going to be doing some quality control, so I'll be manually reviewing the submissions, at least at the start, and making sure that people are submitting useful scenarios, because I want everything that's in the library to be something that is worth your study time. Because part of the reason I think running good scenarios is so important is, as a poker player, your study time is precious. It's time you're not spending at the tables, and it's time where if you're using it inefficiently, you're not growing as a player as well as you can. And so a big idea behind this library is to have high quality scenarios that are rated by the community. You can upvote and downvote scenarios. You can look for scenarios that the rest of the community found helpful, so that you can really efficiently allocate your study time to studying things that are going to help you win more money. So that is the simplest way to submit a scenario, is to take an existing one from the library, tweak the board or the hand ranges, and go from there. The second simplest way to submit a scenario is probably, so it's always going to reload the one you were last working on, so long as you don't refresh the page. So I've already got my new range, I've got my board. But say I want to tweak this a little bit further and actually start customizing the game tree. To do that, again, if I remixed a scenario, this scenario's data is already loaded in. And what I can do is I can go into the tree builder here and actually edit the game tree. So I can say, I'm curious about this bet size here. Maybe I don't think anyone who plays in the games I play in is going to overbet shove, and I want to take away that option and see if it changes the EVs. Maybe I want to make a bunch more edits. I can go ahead, I can play around the game tree, I can customize it, and keep doing so until I've made something new and useful enough to really warrant considering its own solution. The one thing you need to be aware of when you go into this tree editing system is that, say I take this C bit here, and I think right now it's about 2/3 of the pot. Sorry, no, right now it's 35% of the pot. If I want to make it pot, say, so I'm going to make it 91 chips. When I do that, that's going to take all these decisions that came later in the hand and alter them, because now the raise size is different, the amount of chips left is different, the pot at the time is different. So everything kind of down the tree is going to change. So if I want to try and stay as true as I can to the original creator's intention in this scenario, I might want to carefully think about what's happening further down the tree and make sure that I am, doing an apples to apples comparison, not an apples to oranges comparison. That's not always going to be directly possible. I can't say, well, raising a pot size bet is just a different action than raising a third pot size bet. There's always a little bit of difference here. But you'd want to think carefully about your game tree, think carefully about the tweaks you're making. Still, editing these game trees is a great way to go. It's a great way to, add new value to existing scenarios and explore them. As you're going, you can keep track of this complexity number. This is kind of how difficult it is for GTORangeBuilder to solve the scenario and how big the solution is going to be. At least initially, we're imposing a 3 billion complexity cap. So this one is at 1.2 billion. So this one, we could add a lot to it and still be well under the cap. But for some scenarios, especially if you have really big hand ranges, you might already be near the cap. So we can X out of that, go back here. We can click submit, fill out this form the same way. I'm not actually going to do that. But that would be the second layer we can kind of submit a new scenario at, is taking the existing one and editing the game tree, editing the stack sizes, editing the effective stacks, editing the bet sizes here, editing whether here's in position, any of these kind of bet tree settings, whether we're doing it through customizing the game tree or editing these higher level settings. That's kind of the second level of new scenario creation. And then your final option, if you actually just want to submit something completely new, is, you really can just go in here and click submit new and start from scratch. So I can, say, I don't want this board at all. I'm actually doing, maybe an MTT scenario. It's going to warn me that I'm resetting my game tree. That's fine because I'm starting from scratch here. So maybe the pot's 500 and the stacks are only, 2000. We're in MTT. The stacks are short. I can then go in, build my whole own scenario, change the ranges, everything that GTORangeBuilder lets you do, construct a custom tree. I can do that from scratch. And then I can also submit my new scenario that way and really add something completely new to the library. When you are deciding to add something completely new, what I want to warn against, and what I think is really important when you're trying to make a unique scenario, is to have a good understanding of balancing complexity versus, breadth, and making sure you're exploring all the strategic options. So just as a simple example, say I'm making some river scenario here, and this is totally arbitrary, but this is the board. The ranges are, 15.4% versus this 26.9. Doesn't matter. And I'm not sure what the right bet size is on this board. I don't know what people do when they're in this position in my games. I don't know how they bet. What I might be tempted to do would just be, well, I'm just going to go in here and put in 33% and 66% and 100% and kind of cover all my bases and say we're a little deeper. Say we're, more in a 100 BB kind of situation. And I would click run and wait for this to solve. And what we're going to see is that when you try and run this scenario where you just kind of covered all your bases, you say, well, I don't know what the bet size should be, so I'm just going to throw them all in there. And I'm not, maybe I'm not sure if these hands should be in the range or not. I'm just going to put a whole bunch of them in there. When you kind of throw the kitchen sink at a scenario, you're going to end up with a giant game tree that's very unmanageable. And this is just one river. So if you're actually submitting something to the flop library where you're submitting a flop scenario, we're already going to be dealing with tens and thousands of river situations that you might end up in after being on the flop. And if every possible turn and river is this complicated and the flop is this complicated, there's no way that you're going to be able to constructively study the scenario and apply it to help you in your games. There's no way anyone's going to be able to do that. So not you or anyone looking at this scenario later. And because of that, what you're submitting while you're trying, GTOR's display even gets a little buggy when the stacks are big and there's that many bets. But what you're submitting here isn't useful. You're, throwing the kitchen sink at something and actually ending up with a useless solution. So when you're designing these scenarios, you always want to be aware of the trade-off between putting in enough options to really capture the real-world intricacies of the situation, while at the same time only putting in the ones that are relevant and important. So, GTORangeBuilder will do a little bit to help you with that. It has this only show equilibrium path button that we can click here, and that'll at least cut out some parts of the game tree that it turns out the solution never uses. But this game tree is still useless for study. It's not practical. So when you're designing a scenario, if you think there's a certain spot where it's very important that there's 2 bet sizes, what you want to do is use 1 bet size on your whole game tree, and then say, I think it's actually really important that after this initial lead, there's kind of a smallish raise and a medium raise and a big raise and a shove. So I can go in right here and add, maybe a 2,000 chip raise is something I think is really important. If I add something targeted like that to the specific spot that I'm curious about, it makes my game tree a bit bigger, but it doesn't make it unmanageable. And it's really targeting how important is this small strategic addition I'm making. This is kind of the opposite of throwing the kitchen sink at a problem, and it's actually going to give you a much more useful solution. So what I want to get at here is that when you're really building your scenarios from scratch, and this is something I experience when I make my video solution packs, you really want to take the time to put a lot of thought into making a good scenario. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of thought, and just being, just saying, well, I don't really know what the right bet size is here, so I'm going to throw in a bunch of them, that's not going to help you or anyone else. It's not going to make a useful solution. It's not going to make something you can study. So I really highly recommend that you guys take some time, think about what people actually do in the games you play, or if you're specifically interested and maybe they're doing something wrong, set up a game tree where there's the option to do what they usually do, and in the exact spot where you think maybe a different bet size is better, just add in that bet size right there. Don't just say, well, throughout the whole game tree, I'm going to have 2 bet sizes because who knows what the right amount to bet is. So I think that about covers submitting good solutions. I hope you guys are psyched to check out the library. I'm really excited that we've launched it. We've got a whole bunch of good scenarios in here, but we don't have a ton of coverage of, MTTs. We don't have that many cap hands right now. I think we've just got about 5 cap scenarios. So we're really looking to you guys, to the community, to come in here, think of, interesting scenarios you want to run that we can learn a lot from, work together, riff off each other's ideas, expand on each other's scenarios, and hopefully our whole GTORangeBuilder community will gain a much better understanding of GTO by doing so. Thanks for watching, guys.